Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of the ITVP Fireside Chats. I'm going to go ahead and invite my co host Feng and our special guest for today. So while I'm inviting them and they're hopping on, send a request. I can accept your request and get you on here. Awesome. Yes, go live. Okay, I'm hitting accept, so sometimes there's a bit of a delay. Um, we have a history of technical difficulties on here.
Hello, how are we doing?
Oh, hey Kyle,
Hey,
how are
hey,
you?
good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. I'm glad that we got you on here without any issues. We have a history of technical difficulties with the Instagram live, so
Yeah, I figured I'd be on ahead of time, make sure we didn't have any problems.
yeah, no, that's great. I'm just trying to get Siufeng on here as well. I sent them an invite. I don't understand why they're not hopping on. Yeah, I texted them. They said they were ready to go, but like I said, yeah, we always have some issues getting people hopped on. Hey, Siufeng, I see you in the audience. Thank you for sending a request. I
Perfect,
got
perfect.
you. I'm accepting it now. Yeah.
Typical me, bodybuilder, trying to get a meal in, so no worries.
Yeah. No, I saw you eating and I was like, it's all good. Like, we get it.
Hey, hey,
Hi, can you hear
how's it
me?
going?
Hey, Sifong.
Hi.
Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you.
good. Seems like we are pretty smooth today.
Yeah, yeah. No huge issues today. Kyle was on early, so we had no problems getting on.
Per-
Yes, that's perfect. Let me try to grab a pen. Where's pen? Okay.
All right. Well, while Sifong's getting ready, I want to thank everybody for joining us. This is another installment of the ITBP Fireside Chat series. And before we get started and I introduce everybody today, I did want to let y'all know that we have a competition happening this year in Atlanta, Georgia on November 23rd. It's a Saturday. Powerlifting meet weigh-ins are going to be the night before, but if you're interested in competing with us, that is when our competition is going to be. And you can sign up by going to our website and getting your membership. And then once you get your membership, you can register to compete in this year's event. And if you're not sure exactly how to do that, there's actually a post pinned right at the top of our Instagram feed that shows you how to get your membership and how to sign up for the competition. And if you get something out of today's chat, if you enjoy it and you like the work that we do, you can also support us by either donating or just becoming a member. So you don't have to be an athlete trying to compete with us to become a member. That is actually one of the best ways that you can support our work. So just wanted to get that out there before we get started. Am I missing anything, Sufang? I think that's everything, right?
Yes, I think you have done it perfectly.
Awesome. I'm getting better at it every time. I'm just keeping it brief. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the conversation. My name's Nat. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the Assistant Executive Director of the IATBP, and I do a lot of the social media. And my co-host here, Sia Fung, is also on the board of the IATBP and helps me out with the social media. They're also an IFBB pro bodybuilder, posing coach, and LGBT advocate internationally, ambassador to the Gay Games, and to Athlete Ally as well. So, and I believe finished or working on your PhD. I don't know if you're done with it yet.
No, it takes me a few more years.
Okay, okay, working on their PhD. Got it. And our incredible guest today, Kyle. I don't know how to say your last name, Kyle. Can you let me know how to pronounce
It's
that?
Chafe.
Chafe. Okay, that's what I thought, but I didn't want to
Yeah,
like
yeah,
assume
you're
and
all good.
screw it up.
No worries.
So our special guest today is Kyle Chafe, and we're gonna get into his kind of personal journey with bodybuilding and stuff, more specifically in the introduction of the chat. But just to give a brief bio, Kyle is a competitive bodybuilder, competes in Canada with the Canadian Physique Alliance, and I believe you compete in both classic physique and bodybuilding. And Kyle's also a certified personal trainer, nutritionist, and online coach. And I know you studied kinesiology in university. Did you complete that degree
Yeah,
or?
no, so actually, I technically actually have one semester left. So I was like doing my degree, and to be completely honest, I was supposed to get my top surgery technically before I started my degree. So lo and behold, with a couple delays, having to get jump through a couple loops and hoops. I happen to live somewhere like that's very isolated. Like I actually live on an island out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, geez.
So it was a little bit of work for me to actually be able to get to a surgeon, just because of waitlist times, because like essentially other provinces would prioritize getting their own individuals in and like residents in essentially before other places. So it definitely took me a
Mm.
little bit of time. So what ended up happening was as I was about to get my surgery, COVID happened. It postponed it. I continued on with school, of course, because I was like, well, I'm not getting my surgery anyways. I'm not just gonna not do my schooling. But then when
Right.
it came to the point where it was like COVID kind of calmed down, after a couple more cancellations, I finally got my surgery, and then it was like I was supposed to do my last semester of school, and I was like, honestly, I'm just gonna go get my surgery. It was supposed to be like literally dead set in the middle of that really important semester, and I was like, I can't do both, but I've been waiting for this literally for over 10 years, so
Mm.
Mm.
that's what's gonna happen. So then, kind of while I was like recovering from my surgery, I was like looking into like obviously got you know into a lot of like bodybuilding research and like all that kind of stuff and like kind of dove into the online fitness world a little bit more and realized that I like do really enjoy working with other people and for over 10 years I was like a national lifeguard instructor trainer, so I like train people to become lifeguards, and I've always just been like a teacher at heart. And then
Mm.
obviously with my passion for fitness, I was like, oh, I'd really like to do something with that. And I realized that even if I technically finished my last semester, that didn't actually qualify me to like be physically in a gym to train people or physically give people meal plans or anything along those lines. So I actually then like while I was home for a few months, just did like a bunch of online courses, got a bunch of certifications because I had all this free time, which I'm used to working like 7 days a week. I play a bunch of sports, so me being home like sitting around from recovering from top surgery, I was like, I need to do something. So I just kind of dove into doing all that kind of stuff, and then afterwards, I kind of like jumped into coaching people because I just realistically speaking, I loved being able to share that knowledge with other people. And it's been like a beautiful journey along the way. So definitely loving where I am right now. And it definitely ties in beautifully if I want to like, pursue a perfect, like like actually do something with my bodybuilding, then like you kind of need to have a job that supports that in terms of like scheduling and flexibility and like also like not a job that necessarily is going to put like an insane amount of like laborious work on me that's going to impact recovery or anything like that. Like, yes, it's still most definitely possible, and I super respect people that make that happen. But I definitely thought it was a more favorable situation for me to be in, where I'm like working at a gym, working with people surrounded with bodybuilding and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. So yeah, it's been fantastic, I gotta say.
Yeah, I think you already kicked out our
I
question.
was gonna say, yeah, definitely jumped the gun and got into like what
Oh,
got you into becoming a
I'm so
coach,
sorry.
which is
No,
great. No, that's
no,
great.
that's great. We
I
love organic, the
Yeah, we
organic
we like the conversation
conversation.
flowing
yeah.
naturally.
Yeah,
You,
I mean,
I remember I read something and you were like, yeah, like if something along the lines of like, yeah, if we run out of things to talk, and I was like, they're gonna realize really quickly that I don't shut up.
well, that's
We prefer someone that talks a lot than someone that doesn't talk at all. So yeah,
yeah. I mean,
Perfect.
for me, can we just wind back a little bit, like
yeah.
to give our audiences also and us, of course, kind of a timeline. So, may I ask, like, how old are you? Like, what is your
Yeah,
age
yeah,
range?
okay. Yeah,
Age
so
range is weird.
I'm actually 28 years old.
Shit, you're so young. I
Honestly,
feel
I
so
feel
old now.
I feel like I'm so young because it's like, like a lot of the bodybuilding community here in my local hometown, there's kind of just like one gym here that like most bodybuilders go to. And it's just like I see all these like, 19, 20, 21
Oh
year olds like,
wow.
making like and like they've been into bodybuilding now for like 4 or 5 years. So it's like sometimes I'm like, oh geez, like, they're like almost 10 years younger than me and look how crazy far ahead they've gotten with their progress and things along those lines. But it's like, age is definitely relative, and
Mm. But also,
as
everyone starts in a different
yeah,
timeline, right?
yeah, 100%.
And yeah, and I started bodybuilding pretty late too. Like in comparison, like I think I started around 24. And then it slowly gets to the way that it is right now. So
Yeah,
and
and I
just
think
everyone.
Yeah, and I think like for a lot of sports, things might work a little differently in terms of like, being in your prime or your peak or things along
Hmm.
those lines. And I definitely do think that, I'm a strong believer in like, your mental and your physical are most definitely tied together. Whether
Mm.
that's health, energy, or whatever it might be. And I really do genuinely think that like me getting into bodybuilding potentially a little bit later in life, I definitely think that I'm in a better, like mental
Hmm.
place where I'm like, I thrive off discipline. I really enjoy the structure. It's very easy for me to, time manage and things along those lines. Oh, I'm giving thumbs up because I'm talking with my hands. Um, um, but yeah, so like realistically speaking, I think that at any point in time, somebody can start bodybuilding at any age, but there's maybe only so many years that you can probably do that and it's healthy on your body. So, I think if you get into bodybuilding when you're like 19, well, yeah, maybe by the time you're in your, young 30s, that's probably going to be the time where, you should kind of slow down with things. Whereas, if I think that if someone starts bodybuilding maybe in their late 20s, which we've seen lots in history, that, maybe we can, go through our whole 30s doing a bodybuilding safely, and that's going to be totally fine.
And I
But
think,
I
yeah,
think like,
and I think definitely you are at a prime, it's the perfect prime age. I also agree that, if you start later in life, you actually have that mental state, right, to become disciplined. And especially, I mean, you're eating right now. We all have like, a lot of people like, who wants to compete actually suffers from, I mean, the biggest obstacle for them is is the food, right? So I feel like, if you are actually a little bit more like if you're in the late 20s or even early 30s, you have a better mental state to to find that disciplines and motivation, right, in terms of like controlling your food, your training, your sleep, and everything else. But I think that's a really good point too. But let's just wind back a little bit. So you mentioned earlier that you were into a lot of or different kinds of sports. Can you walk us through a little bit? Like when did you start interested in work in sports in general? What type of sports you play, and and does that in some way coincide with how you understand your gender and gender identity?
yeah, so basically, like if I were to go back to like very early
Hmm.
years, I probably spent most of my assisted first steps on like a balance beam in a gymnastics gym because
Oh.
my mother was a national gymnast. And I actually ended her gymnastics career because she got pregnant on me. So realistically speaking, like when I was born, my mom had just opened up her own gymnastics club. So I pretty much spent a lot of time at the gym watching, watching the girls and the guys like train pretty intensely, whether that's, cardio, calisthenics, conditioning, all that kind of stuff, and, doing some pretty, what I would classify as more like extreme sport type things, with some of the stuff that, you're seeing in gymnastics. Um, so that kind of like was what I was surrounded by at a very young age. But by the time I was like, 3 or 4, like my mom was, I was doing swimming lessons, I was playing soccer, I was, you know, playing like, t-ball, like all those kind of little tiny things. But realistically speaking, like by the time that I was in like primary school, I was playing, I was doing gymnastics a few days a week. I was swimming a couple of days a week. I like did a little bit of rock climbing. And then of course I did play like soccer and baseball and like all those like basketball, those types of sports. But both my older brother and my little brother, all the way growing up through school, like since they were 4 years old, both of them played ice hockey. Because I live in Canada, so ice hockey is a pretty big sport over here. Also happens to be my favorite sport, that I was obsessed with since I was a very young child. But since I was born a female and in my household that was a male sport, I was not allowed to play hockey, even though I played every other sport that my brothers got to play. So that was like an ongoing fight and argument in my house for literally 11 years until my stepdad was like, all right, I'm just gonna go register you for hockey, and we're just gonna say that you got ball hockey at school on this night of the week, and I'm just gonna leave your hockey gear in the back of my car, and your mom doesn't even need to know that you're playing hockey. So I was like, yes, let's go. Sick. So then I started playing ice hockey. That obviously was a very short-lived secret. And then my mom was like, well, there's already been like $2,500 dumped into this, so whatever. And then I got really good really quickly. So then it was like, okay, from there, like literally the following year, I was playing all-star hockey. So um, yeah, then I kind of like got super obsessed with hockey. I loved it a lot. And then it finally got to the point where it was like, I really, really hated gymnastics. Like, but I think I hated gymnastics more so because of the attire that I was forced to wear for the
Mm,
sport, not necessarily the sport in itself. Also, like it's very, very, very clear, like separation, segregation. It's like I played at a young age, we played like soccer and basketball and like all these sports, like swimming, all this stuff, and it was like co-ed. Like there's none of this like, no, you're not allowed to do this specific apparatus and you're only allowed to look at this thing. Like, but gymnastics was like so, so strict with that. And I personally just obviously at a young age I didn't understand it at the time, but that was my first feeling of like, I guess, pushback to these societal boxes of gender norms that I was like, honestly, like I was like very young, but I was like, this is stupid.
mm,
Like I don't understand why this is even a thing. Like I was like, I want to do this thing over here that the guys are doing. Like I don't want to walk on a beam where I'm knocking the wind out of myself all the time. Like this sucks. Like I want to go do parallel bars or whatever it might be. So yeah, so that kind of was like the first thing that kind of started me maybe having like some kind of thoughts because at that point in time, like, as a child, it's like I ran around without a shirt on all the time. Like I was a, small kid. I definitely was one of those kids that hit puberty like super, super, super late. So I didn't have any development whatsoever in any capacity. So to me, I was just like, I just didn't like, for me, it took a long time for it to click in until like I literally was hitting puberty that it was like, yeah,
mm,
dude, things aren't going to go the way that you want them to go. It was like, I don't know if I was like in denial for a long time, but like even when we went on vacation and stuff like that all the time as a kid, um, like I always remember like I'd wear like swimming shirts and stuff like that in the pool, but I'd wear like swimming trunks and stuff like that. And I'd always remember
mm,
like I'd always have my hair like relatively short and stuff like that. And I remember like a couple times someone like misgender me because at the time I was technically a female child, but someone would misgender me as male. And I remember feeling so much at the time not knowing what that word was, but like euphoria and like satisfaction within that.
mm,
So that's kind of like probably at a really early age when that kind of like first started setting on. And I definitely would tie that to the first feelings would have been in like the gymnastics gym that I was like, yeah, also like I don't want to wear something that's like this tight and this restricting in places that I don't want it to be. So yeah, so that's kind of like maybe where things spun originally. And then obviously, I probably was probably like grade 10 that I was like identifying as like probably like gender queer, but
mm,
wasn't actually that's the terminology that I had happened to use at that point in time. Obviously, I don't know if that terminology is kind of the same way it was regarded back 15, 16 years ago. But either way, that's kind of like where I was at that point in time, which is kind of where I remained for like probably like a year and a half into high school, which then was meaning I was still playing on female sport teams all through high school. So I was playing, all those other sports that I mentioned earlier. I think I was playing on 7 or 8 different school sport teams. So then in grade 12, when I was like, yeah, like I don't actually identify as female and I feel as if I am male very clearly, um, they kind of allowed me to play on some of the guys' teams, but then didn't let me play on some of the others, which was kind of strange. Um, so it wasn't until I gave, and it wasn't like I was intentionally trying to hurt anybody, but like I was 110 pounds when I was in high school at my heaviest weight ever.
mm, mm,
And when I was playing rugby on the girls' team, I gave 4 people a concussion in 2 games. So they're like, okay, you can play on the guys' team. So I was like, all right, sounds good. But it was like it wasn't until like we got to that point that it was like, okay, you can play on the guys' team. But I was like, that probably shouldn't have been the situation. But that's enough, that's a whole other situation.
mm,
Um, but yeah, so basically, after I then officially graduated, I technically started my hormones 2 weeks after I graduated high school. So at that point in time, I technically wasn't playing any more sports because I technically, at that age, aged out of all the minor, like minor hockey league, minor baseball league, minor soccer league. Like at that point in time, it's either like you kind of play like, varsity level really good and you go on a university team, or you're playing like a rec league, which is like a beer league, which is like not competitive and it's kind of people just like, fooling around. And like that's not really what I was interested in. Like I
Mm,
played competitive structured sports and that's kind of what I wanted, but it wasn't really a thing. And I also wasn't really comfortable necessarily at the very beginning of my transition when I definitely wasn't feeling very confident in this new world that I was kind of living in. Um, and definitely living in a place that was definitely very behind the times in terms of like being inclusive with um, other individuals, or
mhm,
anything that was not considered their specific status quo at the time.
mm.
So I
So
didn't
did
really
you?
feel comfortable to like play, like jump into like a cis male league and play like something at that point in time. Now
Mm,
fast forward like 5 years later, when I built my confidence up in the gym, just built my confidence up like within myself as a human and a person, honestly. Then I did start playing some more competitive like hockey leagues, or lacrosse leagues, or water polo leagues, or things along those lines here locally. And that's been definitely great. But it definitely took me some time before I felt comfortable to kind of dive back into that. But I still never had that like driven, like competitive, like I'm
mm,
like working towards a goal, and like
mm,
there's something that I'm fighting for. So like when I really dove into bodybuilding, and I like kind of got a little taste for it, I was like, oh, like this is lighting up my passion again. Like it's like I'm so fired up. Like, I whether it's like, okay, I'm bulking, I'm really pushing my training, I'm like everything's super locked in and all that good stuff. Or on the other side of things, it's like, I'm working every week to get shredded, get ready. I'm doing a prep for a show. Like, it's like that whole process is like a beautiful experience to me. And I love the challenge that it offers. So that's just really been able to like fill that void of like that competitive nature that I kind of grew up with, that I kind of just felt like I was missing out ever since I transitioned. And like, I definitely feel like the bodybuilding community specifically has been the most welcoming community that I've ever been a part
mm.
of in my entire life. And yeah, it's just been a beautiful experience to just like make the connections and the friendships and things along the lines that I have. I definitely have had a lot of pushback, especially in my younger years. Like I said, I definitely lived in a place that was a little behind the times. So I definitely had my fair share of, um, I don't really like to use certain terminology, so I'll kind of put this a little bit more
Mhm,
passively, but maybe some things that probably shouldn't have been said, or some actions that were physically done that shouldn't have been done.
mm,
And we'll just
mm.
leave that at that.
Yeah.
But realistically speaking, he's probably just asked me to go for a walk or something. um,
Yeah, but I
but yeah,
think yeah,
so but
but
yeah,
yeah, I think it's
so like realistically speaking, like now being a part of a community that's so welcoming and so wholesome and so supportive, and like everyone's just like, it's definitely one of those communities that like anything in life, respect is earned and not given.
mm,
So it's like, you just mind your own business, do your work, and it's like, damn, bro, respect, and it's like people appreciate and see the hard work you're doing because they understand what goes into that because they do it themselves. And it's like, I don't know, you're kind of like a part of something together in a sense, even though you're all individually working on yourselves. And it's such a beautiful thing. And it's like in other sports, I've also seen, sports that I've competed in, it's like, there's been many times I've been on like, on the ice or on a pitch or something on the, and someone's like,
mm.
you know, talking shit about your girlfriend or something like this. It's like, what the hell? Like, we're trying to play a game here. Like, what's going on?
Yeah,
It's like
I
when I'm in a
totally get
bodybuilding
it.
stage, it's like, oh man, like you're doing awesome, man. Like, look at how good of a package you brought, like major
Mhm,
improvements, like whatever. It's just like everyone's so excited for you to be doing good. It's not like, at
mm,
the end of the day, everyone kind of understands that it's like, yes, it's a competition, but the only person you're really competing against is yourself. At the end of the day, you can only control what you bring to the stage. And I think that everybody in the bodybuilding community that I've personally experienced, um, like understands that and respects that, and it's just like such a cool experience to like be battling with someone on stage and then be like, go backstage and like give each other like a bro hug and be like, man, you killed that, like, like
Yeah,
to each other. So
definitely.
yeah, it's definitely
Um,
super cool.
definitely. Sifung, where do you want to jump to on the questions? I feel like we could go a lot of different
Yeah,
directions here.
yeah, I mean, we can just like follow what you just said, how like
Mhm.
thinking about. I know some one of the things like me and Ned are very interested in is like because we are in mostly we understand more about the American
Yeah.
bodybuilding. Oh, taking shirt off.
Sorry, it's like it's really really warm over here now. I'm not really a big fan of the heat, if I'm being honest. That's
Okay.
why that's why I live in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So we were actually me and Nat we are more familiar with the American like kind of
Mhm.
bodybuilding scene in general, especially like the relationship between like trans and trans masculine folks in particular participating or just undergoing their fitness journey. So I think it's kind of becoming popular, especially if you see that on social media, TikTok, etc. I'm just curious about in Canada how is like how is the bodybuilding scene in general, because you did mention something about your own experience with your own bodybuilding community, but what do you think of like the bigger community in bodybuilding? Do you think that they are LGBT or even trans friendly?
Like from everything that I personally have experienced, like everyone's been super accepting. It's like
Mm,
at the end of the day, for a lot of bodybuilders that I personally have had like a more personal conversation with, let's say, and it hasn't just been like, oh hey bro, like have a good day, like
mhm,
good pump or something like that, you know, for the most people it's like, yeah man, like I really understand that. It's like, a lot of bodybuilders, I don't know if this is a subject that I'm not supposed to touch on, so if it is, then I'll just put this to bed. But like a lot of bodybuilders that I personally know, take steroids.
mhm,
So they're like, hey, like, to a certain extent, like I understand wanting to change your body so that it,
mm,
represents what you're looking like. And obviously, taking steroids and taking testosterone are two completely different things entirely on extreme levels. But, to a certain extent, I think that there is some relation from their perspective to understanding maybe how I feel and how I perceive things. So
mm,
I do think that there's some generalized understanding to
mm.
a certain degree. And I've even had conversations with people that they're like, yeah, I don't 100% fully understand it, but like I kind of do, like, but I appreciate the conversation and like I respect you. And like that's good for me, you know?
And I think that's very interesting because I do see that overlapping, right, of people using different types of like supplements and steroids, and versus like trans people who are both working towards the goal of sculpting a body that they really desire. So I feel like for that overlapping actually create a certain mutual understanding of each other. That's a really cool thing. So I'm actually very curious. Do you feel like there are a lot of trans coaches like yourself in Canada? Because in America, there's an increasing amount of coaches who would be like, very out and visible as a trans person. I'm curious about in Canada, in your understanding, do you feel like this is also something evolving?
Yeah, I definitely do think that it is something that's evolving. Personally, the only downfall really of me living over here on this little island is the fact that like, we have a very small population over here and I don't really have much exposure to a lot of other people. So to say that I have a large, you know, exposure to a large community of lots of different people, that definitely wouldn't be true because I have like on my entire island, there's only 500,000 people.
Mm.
So, like, it's a very, very small place here. Now, realistically speaking, do I know of some other trans identifying individuals, trans mask individuals, who are also online coaches, who are also in the bodybuilding world? Yes, I do. I do know a couple of people for
Mm-hmm.
sure, right off the top of my head. They've either followed me on Instagram and followed me somehow, or likewise, vice versa. So I definitely know of a few people. Would I say that I know as many that I know in the States? Definitely not.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting because I do feel like, there would be some sort of, and I feel like, because with technology and also social media, right, it becomes more transparent that you can find each other more easily, you can connect with each other more easily too.
Yeah.
And let's switch the topic slightly different,
Yeah.
but related. So like we were both very curious about your real, really the experience when you were competing, right,
Mm-hmm.
alongside with other like cis men, right? Because this is not something like most of us would have experience about. And so, like, what is the general experience? Do you feel different, or do you feel like basically, we're same, when you're competing, with, in men's division. And are you conscious? Because for me, I mean, and we also interviewed some of our like previous guests who also competed in the men's division. Like somehow, at some point, they would be like conscious about, their body, in particular ways. I'm just curious about, your own experience, competing
Honestly,
alongside with this men.
yeah, I'm probably not the perfect person to ask that question to, just because like I get like really, really, really focused on a goal. And by like really focused on a goal, like probably maybe a little too much. So like when I was on that stage, I was like thinking about every single posing cue. I was thinking about outposing everyone. I was thinking about holding and stacking my abs perfectly. Small breathing. Don't let this out twist. Torque out on your knee. Don't let it go. Open more in your lats. So that's all I'm thinking about the whole
So
time. I'm
you
like,
weren't even
you are
like
good.
conscious of like you weren't even
No,
it wasn't even like on
no,
your mind really like,
no.
oh,
I
I'm
was
trans, are
like,
these people gonna clock me, whatever.
no, I was like, I
No.
am looking to kill everybody on the stage right now, and the only thing I can control is how I pose. So I'm damn
Mm.
well
Mm.
gonna focus on every little tiny detail that I can possibly control. And that's all I did.
And that's
And
really
then
great.
it wasn't really until after I went off the stage
Mm.
that, like, after finals, and I honestly think that
Mm.
maybe some people intentionally didn't make this comment to me until after finals, which I actually really appreciated because honestly, had someone said this to me like after prejudging before I did finals, maybe it would have been thinking about it a little
Mm.
bit. But like many people came up to me and were like like half teared up and were like, "Hey, like I just want to say like I'm so proud of what you did there today, like getting up there with everybody,
Mm.
like, obviously that was probably pretty exposing for you, but like, it was just fucking amazing to watch you do that. Sorry, I sometimes curse, so I'm really sorry if I'm not supposed to do that.
You're good, you're good.
Um,
No, yes,
um,
I'm also very curious. Like when you apply, so in Canada, I mean, especially with your federation, when you apply, for a bodybuilding competition for a division, do
Hmm.
you need to show that you're trans, or is it something that you are just very open to talk about it?
yeah, no, I didn't necessarily, well, see, the thing is like I competed in my local hometown. Like
Hmm.
Oh, so
my comp
everyone kind of know you, right?
Yeah, so like my competition was like where the venue was literally a 5 minute drive from the gym that I train at and everybody that I compete with train at.
Uh,
So realistically speaking, a lot of the people that were at the show was like a bunch of my family, a bunch of people that like even if it wasn't like a bunch of my friends from the gym, it was like a bunch of other people's friends from the gym. Like so it was like a bunch of people who like technically already knew me or knew somebody that knew me. So like obviously I was one of the very first trans people to come out here publicly.
mm,
So I definitely am more probably known than maybe other people, if that makes sense. So I feel like it's not really like I was really necessarily thinking and be like, oh, like I might get outed and I kind of want to be stealth in this situation, but I
Hmm.
don't really have control over it. It was
mm,
kind of like, hey, bro, that's already that's already gone out the window. It's literally whatever. Like here we are.
Yeah.
Now this next competition that I'm going up to is going to be in Toronto, and I'm going to a
mm,
very much larger show with a much larger lineup, but also a much larger audience. So the thought obviously has crossed my mind of, how are you going to feel maybe differently being in front of people that don't know you prior to versus, being in a full auditorium of people who already
Yeah.
know you and already respect you, because that's a big thing,
Mhm.
So obviously that's something that, I feel like the best thing that I think in life to do is to prepare ahead of time, you know? So I think, whether that's visualization for mental preparation for yourself or whatever it might be, I find that to be a very useful tool to setting myself up for success when I end up in that present moment, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yes, that definitely
Yes.
is. Nat, you have something to say?
No, no. I'm just I didn't think about like competing or because usually when you compete, like you're surrounded by people that you don't really know unless you've been competing for a long time, and so the experience that it must have been like for you getting to compete in your hometown, like surrounded by people that you know, versus competing, with people that you don't know, and then maybe your transness can become a factor because you're not out to those people, they don't really know you or know what your history is. So that's very interesting.
And I have a
Um,
follow up, a little bit more naive question. So I'm curious a little bit about like how Canada, in terms of changing legal gender and stuff, how Canada works. So do you need to have like top surgery, or do you need a, I don't know, a proof or something like
yeah.
in order to change a legal gender?
So
And
back,
in yeah.
oh, sorry, you were going to say? I didn't mean to cut you off there, sorry.
No, and it's just like when you are applying for a competition in Canada, in bodybuilding competition in
Mm.
Canada, do you necessarily need to showcase? Because I know in some of the NPC shows, basically you just give them the name. They
Yeah,
don't really check the
they don't check
gender.
ID and
Yeah,
stuff.
so I'm just curious about in Canada, does that work similarly or differently?
Yeah, literally, it's just like you type in your name, you type in your gender,
Mm,
you fill out your information. When you show up, you have to show some form of identification to prove that your name is who you are.
mm.
But at the end of the day, like what you want to identify in terms of your pronouns, whether that's a legal gender marker change or not, is technically just up to you.
Mm.
You know,
But in Canada, in terms of changing legal gender, does that
in
require
terms of
any?
Yeah, so back like when I first originally transitioned, because I technically started my transition process back in 2012. I
Mhm.
technically started hormone therapy in 2013, but back then you were required to have some form of surgery and so many years of
Mm.
hormone therapy before
Oh.
being allowed to apply for a gender change.
Mm.
Now that was long eradicated because that just didn't even make any sense.
Mm.
Um, it's like, yeah, you actually got to wait until you can pay for a $12,000 surgery, even though inflation is, so extremely high
Mm.
that no one can really afford to live. It's like, what? That doesn't even make sense. So, yeah, so luckily, thankfully, someone had two brain cells and was like, yeah, this doesn't actually make sense. So now it's more so, obviously we, go through your process of your diagnosis, of course. So, whether that's you're seeing your sexologist or whatever, to, first, of course, come to whatever diagnosis you are, for myself, of course, I was seeing a sexologist. She helped me come to the realization, working through some stuff, that I do identify as a trans man. So at that point in time, me seeing her and her, essentially giving me a letter saying that I did see her and we did work through what we needed to work through, essentially to come to this, I guess, end conclusion point. Now, it doesn't need to be a long process per se. Some people obviously have worked through things on their own, come to terms with that, and then they make an appointment. I so happened to start a couple years earlier because I was like, hey, I'm having a hell of a lot of confusion and I kind of need to figure some things out. So I kind of started the process before I was of age to be allowed to take my testosterone. And then when I came of age, then I kind of just started. Um, so nowadays, it would be a much smoother process in which you would, have that, a therapist slash sexologist appointment, you know, obtain that diagnosis, and then essentially you would then um, go through what we would refer to as like, MCP, which is like Health Canada's, um, you know,
Mm.
let's call like data place for each person. I don't even know what to call it, to be completely honest. But you would just basically apply there. I'm
Mm,
sure it's like, fill out a little bit of paperwork kind of situation. And then from there, that's pretty much it. So it's not too crazy of a process. I think there definitely is like a lot of resources now. Also, like I can just like go on the government of Canada's page and it'll actually like show me how to do it and like give me instructions on how to make that process easy.
mm,
Whereas when I was younger, it was like, what question are you trying to ask? I don't know how to help you.
mm,
I'm like, okay, great. So definitely super, super excited to see the advancements specifically in the past decade that have occurred because, you know, transitioning enough, there's so much that you're going through, both mentally and physically, whether that's, internally or externally with relationships and other people having to process that as well. It's like, man, we do not need to create like all these extra loopholes to make the whole situation 10 times harder than it needs to be, you
mm.
know? So
Yeah.
I personally am super happy to see the movement and the progressive, trajectory that Canada's kind of taking forth with these types of things.
Mm,
And, of course, they've been fantastic with like enforcing laws that are really good for, protecting trans rights.
mm.
So yeah,
So
one of the reasons
currently,
why I
oh,
love Canada and I probably won't leave in the near future.
yeah, I mean, we all love Canada for that particular aspects of healthcare and, the not only
Mm-hmm.
the universal healthcare, it's just that, they're just much more sensitive to issues like that.
Yeah.
So thinking about we're going back a little bit about the competition and, the whole process of like preparing a competition itself. Like, what is your favorite part and what is the most challenging part for you?
Like bodybuilding as a whole or prepping for a show?
Like prepping for a
Preparing
competition.
for a competition.
Yeah.
Prepping for a competition. Um, to be completely honest, sorry, I'm just finishing my last bite. I'm done now, I promise.
Take your time, take your time.
Um, all my friends are like, man, you're always eating. You never stop eating. Um, but yeah, so realistically speaking, what was the two parts of that question again? I'm gonna make sure I answer that all.
What's your favorite and your least favorite part about prepping for
Okay.
a competition?
All right. So realistically speaking, I would have to say I thoroughly, thoroughly love structure. And like I know it probably like people are like, oh man, you're a broken record. You say that all the time. Like, but like I do really thrive off
Yeah.
routine. I love it. And obviously anybody who knows anything about a bodybuilding prep, that's a regimented structure for a long period of time. And yeah, you're doing the same thing day in and day out. You're checking off those boxes. I'm getting up, fasted cardio, get a meal in, personal training session, get another meal in, get some steps in. Like
Hmm.
it's like everything, every single minute to the day is like dialed into the second. And honestly, like I really, really, really enjoy that. So that's one part of prep that I personally love. And I love the challenge of prep, like seeing like the progress. Like, I'm at the point in prep now where it's like literally every day I'm seeing changes. So, at the beginning of prep, it's like, oh, week to week, I'm seeing good changes. Now it's like, oh, like every day is like different. I'm seeing new lines. Like that's so exciting and so rewarding, So I absolutely love that. And there's definitely something about me. Obviously, like I played a lot of more aggressive sports growing up, so I was definitely like pushed pretty hard by my coaches. And there's just something about that, like, just like having that like grit and like getting in for like a hard session and just like really pushing things, even if you don't got it in ya and like overcoming that anyways, that like I get a lot of personal satisfaction from. So yeah, like prep for me is like that's a obviously there's some points in time where I'm like, wow, I'm really tired. Like, this is a rough day. I'm having a hard time like mentally focusing. But for the most part, I absolutely love every single part of it. Now, to say what my least favorite part about prep is, I think that it's not actually directly actually something to do with myself. I
Mm,
would have to say that prep, the my least favorite part of prep is the fact that it does impact the people that are around me. And in the sense that I don't have as much time to offer because my schedule is so much more regimented. There isn't the flexibility to, oh yeah, let's go, grab a bite to eat somewhere. I can't eat off plan. There's not the opportunity of like, oh, there's this awesome concert happening next month that I really want to go see. It starts at 11 p.m. Well, sorry, that doesn't work with my sleep schedule. So I can't
mm,
do that during prep. That's going to
Mm,
impact my cardio, my training the next day. That's going to build up fatigue that's unnecessary. At 5 weeks out, that's not intuitive to my goals. So I do need to a certain, to at a certain point in prep, I do need to, in a sense, be a little selfish. And the people that are in my life, whether it's my girlfriend, my parents, my brother, my close friends, whatever it might be, they all significantly understand that and support that. But obviously, there comes a point in time where it's like, even if my girlfriend wants to be very, very supportive and she verbally is being supportive, um, they're obviously, in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, I haven't taken her out on a date night in, 6 weeks. That's not really
mm,
fair. I'm not giving her the love that she is currently giving me, supporting me through this. So that imbalance, I tend to find maybe a little bit, I feel a little bit of guilt because of
mm,
that. Um, so, it's also understanding that it's like, okay, last year after I concluded my show, 3, 4 weeks after my show, we went down on vacation for a week and a half, and
mm,
like same thing this year, we were planning to go on a vacation, but, things had to change around a little bit because, life threw me a curveball this past couple weeks, which we can talk about a little bit later. Um, but yeah, like we were supposed to go to Costa Rica for 2 weeks right after my show this year because I was like, hey, proactively,
mhm,
I'm probably going to be in the point that end of prep where I'm not going to be able to, have even like a meaningful conversation because I have no, oh, sorry, my cat is rubbing up against my tripod. Um, but yeah, so it's like just being mindful of the fact that like when I maybe not won't be able to give what I want to give, and then realizing that like, I might need my body and my mind needs a break, so it's beneficial for me to probably go on vacation as well. But she deserves to, feel that love and have that quality time together because, really in my opinion, that was something that was deprived for a long period of time. And whether that's, 4 or 5 weeks, I do think that, does create an impact. And whether, somebody says, yeah, no, I don't mind. I totally understand. I totally support you. Like, I just want to see you crush your goals. You
mm.
know, you still need to be mindful about those things,
Yeah,
So that,
yeah. And I agree,
so
I agree. And I think that's kind of, the bodybuilding life, basically,
yeah,
a competitor. I mean, competitive bodybuilder kind of lifestyle that, you always have to
Yeah.
sacrifice, your loved ones, for really setting that, very precise goal that you want to aim for.
Right.
And I'm just curious. So I know you're prepping for a competition right now. So are there, is there particular goals that you want, you're looking at your physique, from your past competition and say, okay, this is something I want to improve. And then I aim to, get a better, whatever, I don't know if it's body part or symmetry or whatever. So yeah. And so what is that, do you have something that you think, yeah, okay, I'm going to improve. I want to see myself differently this time on stage. Um,
yeah, yeah, definitely. So, obviously bodybuilding is a very, very, subjective sport. You're being judged based on, proportions, conditioning, size, symmetry, the whole nine yards.
Mhm.
And in my personal opinion, and I know this is 100% just my personal opinion, um, I
Mhm.
don't really think that you can 100% know exactly what that is for your own physique until you kind of get stage lean and you get that tan on and you kind of see what
mm,
you look like on stage. So up until the point that I actually was physically on the stage, I was completely under the mind frame last year that I was like, hey, I just want to, show up. I just want to, say that I, put my best efforts in. I checked off each box each day and I did the thing, I just want to show up there for myself and I'm not expecting to, do that great. I know a lot of the guys that I was competing against were like, 50, 60 pounds bigger than I was. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go have some fun with this and be proud, get some cool pictures for myself, and that's kind of where I was going in with it. And then when I seen my stage shots afterwards, I was like, holy shit, that's what you look like. Like, and
mm,
I was honestly a
Yeah.
little bit in shock as to how I did look. Because I guess, I tend to maybe undersell myself. I know we're
Mm,
all our hardest critic at the end of the day. But it wasn't really till I seen that, and then obviously, winning first place in classic physique and bodybuilding, both divisions I competed in, I was like, oh, okay, like, maybe I do have something going on here.
mm,
But really, last year it was like I was going into that show knowing I don't have the muscle or the size that I want.
mm,
I just want to kind of, give this a little go. At that point in time, I was 27 years old, and I was like, hey, bro, you're not getting any younger. So either try it and it's not for you, or give it a try and then, like, let's really do this,
mm,
So then I was like, all right, well, damn, looking at those pictures, we're really doing this. So then I like immediately kind of was like, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. What's my like lagging body parts? Well, to be completely honest, I think judging on my stage shot specifically last year, in my opinion, I don't think that my shoulders were too bad. I don't think that any of my part of my back is really that bad. But I did notice that, my hamstrings were definitely more dominant than my quads. My quads were definitely lagging in terms of being proportionate for my
mm,
physique, in my
mm,
opinion. So, that was definitely a big thing. My chest also, where I did have really nice rounded, like decent shoulders, I felt like my chest was kind of maybe smaller than what I would like it to be in terms of it being balanced with the size of my front and my side delt.
mm,
So basically my biggest things were, okay, quads, number one focus. Quads are on the top
mm,
of the list. Then we're definitely getting that chest built up, because upper chest specifically, like right in through here, I kind of had it was like maybe this was full, but then this was kind of a bit concave. So I didn't have that
mhm,
when I went to hit the side chest and bring it over, I didn't have that actual cupping roundness of that cap of that back pec. And then obviously that top part of that front shelf was just like kind of flat. So I was like, yeah, that definitely gotta be fixed. And then I was like, if there's any other thing I could probably pick apart, that would kind of, if I fix those other things, my arms are gonna then be a
mm,
problem because they're
mm,
just kind of holding on to being proportionate. So I was
mm.
like, all right,
That's really cool.
I was like, I've never ran an arm day before. So
Mm,
I actually added an arm day into my split last year. So I actually ran that for my whole off season, which definitely made a drastic difference. My arms grew like an inch and a half,
mm,
in actual size from like lean to lean size measurements. So I'm super, super happy with that.
mm,
And I think out of any body part that's probably done the most growing in the past year, it's definitely my quads. And then secondly, I would probably say it's like I don't even try to grow my back, but the thing just doesn't stop growing. So my back is definitely probably my second body part that grew the most. But I definitely
mm,
think I did a really good job at balancing out that chest so things are a little bit more proportionate.
mm,
But again, like I said earlier, until we like really, really, really get like depleted and then get a little bit more of a carb up situation happening, we're not really going to know exactly how well that translated,
mm, mm.
into what my approach was. And then
Yeah.
obviously then that's just going to be more collected data that I can then go back to the drawing board with,
Mm-hmm.
realize what do I need more of, what do I need less of, what manipulations do I kind of need to make in terms of like frequency training, maybe style of training, maybe where
Mm-hmm.
I'm placing my rest days
Yeah.
or my higher food days or things along those lines, and then kind of just work from there. I personally kind of think that you're not really going to kind of see your, let's say, like what your physique is kind of gonna
Yes.
evolve into until you're like a good 4 or 5 years into this.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah. I
kind of
think
still
so.
like,
Mm.
I kind of consider myself having a baby
Mm-hmm.
physique. It's still like, it's not
Mm-hmm.
even a teenager yet. We don't know where this is going. So, sometimes people are like, well, why are you doing classic physique and bodybuilding? You should just be focusing
Mm-hmm.
on one. It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
my body doesn't know where it wants to go yet. I personally love classic physique, but you got to listen to what your physique flourishes
Yes.
in at the end of the day. And if I'm going to prep for, 5 months straight, well, then I'm going to get more than 30 seconds on the stage. I'm going to do
Mm-hmm.
two divisions. So I get double the time when I'm already ready to go.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I mean, and you talk a lot about the details of what you want to improve, for upcoming, do for this upcoming competition. I'm just curious. I mean, we are curious about, whether you actually hire coaches for your prep, and as a coach yourself, right? Do you feel like, most cisgender like coaches out there, right, are available to? I mean, do you think that they have the knowledge, right, to actually prep a trans person in particular?
So I would say that to say that people have the knowledge is one question. To say
Mm-hmm.
that people don't have arrogance is another question. So
Oh.
what I mean by that is, does someone have the appropriate knowledge and the appropriate resources to have the knowledge as an experienced coach working with enhanced individuals left, right, and center to be able to know how to navigate a trans individual?
Mm,
100%. You most definitely do have that ability if you have been coaching people for 10 to 15 years, very in depth in the bodybuilding world. And if you don't understand hormones and all of those things, then you shouldn't have been prescribing people PED prescriptions in the first place, telling people
mm-hmm.
what cycles to take, because you shouldn't be doing that because you don't understand it.
Mm,
So if you are somebody who is coaching at that level and you say, no, I don't know how to coach a trans person, you're just being arrogant. That's all it is. It's just arrogance. So,
mm,
from my personal experience, have I ran into some people that are like, yeah, no, I wouldn't know how to deal with that? It's like, okay, well, you're just being a little arrogant there, buddy. you know? So, from my personal experience, most cisgender coaches that I personally have been a part of have been super, super fantastic. They're like, hey, are you're a human being, you have a human body, every human body is also individually different. So,
mm,
it's not like, oh, hey, you're trans. Well, this is the plan that you need to have. That's not how it works. It's like, I know you're a coach. I'm a coach myself. Not
mm,
one individual one of my clients have the exact same plan. It's like
mm,
every single person needs a little bit different in terms of like a macro perspective, in terms of a recovery perspective, frequency, how much volume they can handle, what muscles grow with better, recruitment of different fibers from, different loading angles. It's like at the end of the day, everything is going to be person to person dependent. So that's kind of like what I kind of view things as,
mm,
and like how I feel. For the most part, where I do seem to be a part of I got brought into a positive community within
mm,
the bodybuilding community. I think that I've definitely had a lot of positive exposure due
mm,
to that reasoning. So,
Mhm.
a lot of people more so are just like, hey, you're a human being. You're a human being.
mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah, yeah,
you
that is
know,
so cool.
and that's
And
kind of,
I would ask you for your advice, right? As someone who has been hiring coaches and being your coach yourself, like because a lot of our like competitors are trans and non-binary, and then it might be that a lot of times it is their first time trying to undergo a prep, trying to like figure out what to do with like the body, and they might consider hiring a coach. So would you have one or two advice or tips for them, in approaching, a coach, for a prep, for instance.
yeah, so like realistically speaking, in my personal experience, like how I kind of approach things when I was sourcing out a coach for myself, I was literally like, hey, this is what I'm looking for.
Mm,
This is the style of coaching that I'm looking for. I don't want you to say, hey, high five, good job. You did 1 out of 10 things this week. That's not what I'm looking for. I want a
mm,
coach that's going to be a hard ass. I want a coach that's going to say, hey, this isn't good enough. I want more. And I just want someone who's going to basically respect me. So I personally do disclose, not that I think that it's whatsoever at all anybody's responsibility to disclose this by any reason whatsoever, but I personally chose that when I reached out to source out coaches, I was like, hey, also want to let you know that I am trans. So if you're not comfortable with that, just let me know from the get-go so we don't waste each other's time. So literally literally what I would say, because it's like, hey, if you're not going to respect me, then I'm not getting on an hour phone call to listen to all your prices and tell me how you do things when you're not going to respect me as a human being. So, adios. And vice versa. Why would I ask them to get on a phone call with me if I don't actually want them to work with me?
mm,
So, I kind of just go through the process of like, hey, I'm going to create my own filter here just because I honestly, time's valuable and I don't like to waste it.
mm,
Do I think that that's the individual's responsibility to have to disclose that? No, whatsoever. Not what's by any means.
Mhm.
But if I didn't want to disclose that, then I would probably just go the route that I also went, in which I outsourced, hey, I know you're trans. I follow you on Instagram. Or, hey, do you know any other trans guys who have coaches that are chill and cool and accepting
mm,
that I could reach out to as
mm,
well? So it's like, maybe if you don't feel comfortable disclosing that, then just be like, if someone reached out to me and was like, hey, bro, who's your coach? It's like, hey, Morgan McDonald's my coach. Okay. I know I'm not the only trans person that he's coached. He's coached multiple trans people, and he's super respectful. And he's just like, hey, you're a bro, you're a human.
Hmm.
Okay. Here's your plan. Like, how things feeling? Like, this is an objective process, just like any other client,
Hmm.
and I appreciate that thoroughly. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So realistically speaking, as soon as I said that, he was like, pretty much what I said. He was like, "Hey, you're a human being. You're a human being. I work with human beings, so we're good." Like,
Hmm.
he's like,
Yeah.
he's like, I don't do like dog or cat nutrition, but if you're a human being, we're good, right?
Yes.
So it's like,
Just to be mindful of time, but by the way, we only have like 10 minutes left because I want to leave 5 minutes for Q&A. So just giving you all a heads up.
Yeah, I mean,
appreciate that.
yeah, I'm great with like the questions that we have. Ned, do you have any specific questions that you
And
want to ask?
I will say for a posing coach, I also did do the same thing. Now, I actually did find it was more difficult to find a posing coach specifically
Oh.
than it was to find
Mm.
a new training or nutrition coach.
Mm.
So I
Why
just wanted to
is that?
throw that out there. I don't know. So I don't know if that's like there was people that were just like, yeah, no, not really that comfortable, bro. And I was like, okay, cool, no worries, all good. But I did notice that like it was definitely way easier. But the other thing is like, in terms of experienced and knowledgeable and trustworthy, in terms of like, hey, you know how to teach me my shit, posing coaches, it's like it's not like you have the amount of people that you have as online coaches. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's
Mm.
like, I'm only going to trust a couple people's opinion to teach me how to pose, if that
Mm.
makes sense. It's like if I
Yeah.
can see that they demonstrate that. So I essentially had my coach who does my training and nutrition, Morgan. He was doing posing coaching with Alyssa Kiesling, who's been to the Olympia. So I
Mhm.
was like, whoa, that's so cool. Anyways, like one day, like we ended up like getting in contact. So she ended up doing some of my posing with me, but like she's probably like the most respectful, chill human on the face of the earth. Like, having someone that's also part of the LGBT community is super, super dope. So I personally felt 10 times more comfortable with her than maybe
Mm.
doing like it with like a cisgendered male. So it's like, I'm here like, in like pretty much no clothing, like multiple days a week with you. I definitely did feel more comfortable. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
for me, it was also like just about like me feeling more comfortable. I definitely would feel more comfortable, with like Alyssa or maybe with like Sifong or someone who I'm gonna feel like is going to not be maybe thinking about things that I don't necessarily want to be discussing or thinking about myself, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right?
No, that
So,
And
makes sense.
and I think in
Understandable.
general, it's just like contest prep coaches are just in number wise, it's just more, right?
yeah,
So I think a lot of
yeah,
times that people who do contest prep also kind of do all sorts of other stuff like the
Yeah.
supplements, the posing all together, but not necessarily very specialized in those things. So they might not have. I feel like being someone who can coach someone doing posing, you really need some sort of an eye to know what judges want,
yeah,
right? So I think
yeah,
that and the primary thing is to pose according to judges' view. I think that's the first thing. Most people just pose in front of the mirror,
yeah,
which is not exactly where the judges is looking at when you're on the
yeah,
stage. So I think that's
100%.
those are the little details where I feel like that this requires another specialty.
Yeah,
Versus than just looking into your macros and your
yeah.
calories and stuff
And
like
like
that.
and like I personally believe that posing is an art form.
Mm-hmm.
I view it as an expression of art is how I feel about posing. So, I in the past year have like started to dabble into like helping more of my like lifestyle clients get into posing. I've helped a couple of my like buddies that also compete around the gym, like, help them fix up a couple things as well like that. But it's been so interesting like working with different bodies and teaching people
Mm-hmm.
like how to cue like I want you to like open something instead of squeezing something and like, oh, I
Mm.
actually want this rotated while this is flexing in the opposite direction,
Mm-hmm.
but like all like you said, Sifang, it's like very much so an illusion. So it's like we want to
Mm-hmm.
be posing for the judges, and it's like posing is an art of illusion at the end of the day. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
all those little cues really, really do make such a huge difference. But it's been
Mm-hmm.
like really cool to kind of like, it's like the more I kind of help other people with their posing, it's like the more I learn about posing myself as
Mhm.
well, you know? So
Yes,
super, super
yes,
awesome.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, thank you so much for this very engaging conversation. You actually have us. It's very rare that we don't need to ask questions, and then you can just
Yeah.
continuously flow with our questions. So thank you so much for that. And I think for the remaining few minutes, Nat, do you have like do you see any questions asked by audiences on your
Yeah, we
side?
did have one. We did have one question come in
Mm-hmm.
earlier. So I'll try and interpret this as best I can. We had Brown Bear Butch asked, any advice for finding local like-minded lifters? I have to assume like-minded means queer or non-binary, trans, or just open-minded lifters. So any advice for finding local like-minded lifters from either of you, I guess.
Yeah. So, like, if I was speaking like directly from my own experience in my local hometown specifically, like I said, I live in a pretty small area, so it's kind of like everybody knows everywhere, everybody here. So, I do tend to find like I could be like, hey, like, what gyms around are LGBTQ friendly? And it's like, okay, well, only really these two are known for that, So like that's where I'm going to gravitate t towards. But like realistically speaking, I feel like, social media would probably be the place where I would gravitate towards the most to try to kind of navigate those things instead of like just putting myself into a bunch of different situations personally myself. That's what I've done in other situations in the past. Like I just went down to like if I go travel or something, like I probably like proactively kind of just search those things up ahead of time. And then, a lot of times I do tend to find that like, I tend to trust my friends that I make online. So it's like I have many, other trans brothers or sisters or things along those lines on my Instagram. So it's like, hey, I'm actually like traveling down like kind of close to where you live. Like, do you have anywhere you can recommend that's like a safe space for me to kind of go do my thing? And like I find personally, like I'm gonna trust someone's like word of mouth as an actual human being versus like maybe a review that I can see that might be created by the person who owns the gym.
Yeah, I also think that social media is a good means to do that. And one of the things I would recommend doing is to look into the hashtags. So sometimes first of all it's easier for you to locate if people use hashtag like trans or queer lifters, something like that. And then I would just do a person search. Once see you look into all these people who have those tags, and then you see where they work out. Sometimes they put out where they work out, and then you get an idea of where they locate. So if they're somehow closer to you, then what I would do is that I always try shooting in DM and see if they respond, right? Or comment on their, on their post. That's how, or their stories. So that's how they usually respond to you. And then, just introduce yourself and see, if you can get a chance to, maybe, work out together, things like that. So I think that might be one way of doing that. Um, I'm sorry. Yes. So, I, okay.
Someone's knocking on your
Yes,
door. It's
yes.
okay. I heard.
Okay, yes. So, but I have,
um,
okay, so from my side, I also have a question. So the question is a little bit more political. It's about, how you feel, about, generally, like, the trans athletic, there's a lot of controversies around trans athletes competing in, especially in the women's, but, somehow, sometimes there were also, controversies about trans people competing in the men's division. So what are your views of that, in particular? And what do you think like Canadians in general think of that? And I will answer the
Like
while you answer that. Yeah.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
right, sounds good. But yeah, so like obviously I can't answer this for
Mm-hmm.
everybody's perspective, and obviously, like I said, I do live like literally off the east coast of Canada, so I'm definitely not even in like in the center of Canada or like in the main hub of what's going on everywhere else. Um, but for the most part, I think that like Canada is definitely more progressive in terms of like how things are viewed and accepted and like protected, so to speak. Um, but like, have I also heard people say to me specifically that like, hey, I don't think you should be allowed to compete on stage with like actual guys. Like, it's
Mm.
like, okay, so have I heard a comment or two here or there like that? Yeah, and then have I had like a good 200 people be like, yeah, and he kicked your ass on stage, so shut up. Um,
Mm.
so honestly, at the end of the day, in you got, millions of people, chances are there's gonna be a couple people in that group of people that are just gonna be, you know,
Accepting, maybe,
abs yeah,
or
just being
understanding.
ridiculous. Yeah, well, what I'm trying to say is there might be a couple of people in there that, might not be accepting or might not view things how like the rest of things are progressing over here. But like it's like I've experienced that in every single place of my life, like every job I've had or every organization I've been a part of. It's like even if like the organization as a whole and like 90% of people here as a whole are super inclusive and super supportive and super accepting, there's always that 5 to 10% that are just absolute assholes for no
Mm.
reason. It's like, so at the end of the day, do I think it's more majority is in the positive direction? Yes, I do. Do I still see sometimes the latter, which I don't like to see? Yes, I do. So,
Mhm.
I don't really think I can put a clear answer on that. Obviously, we already clearly understand how I personally feel about the topic,
Mm.
in the sense that it's like, I'll reiterate the same thing that I've said probably 100 times now, is that, we're all just damn human beings.
And I
Just,
love that. I love that.
you
I'm going
know,
to put that as
like,
just as our slogan. We are all just damn human being, you know.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
it. That's it.
So,
And that's a beautiful way to kind of end our conversation today here.
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think, after all, we are all we just want to be ourselves, right? We just want to do things that we love. And we just love, the passion that you have, in competing. And we wish all the best for your upcoming competition. If you need posing, tips, just ask me. Like, just
appreciate it.
find me, that, but, I think, I really wish you, and then you have an amazing physique and a bright future. And I'm really excited to see how you're going to flourish, in the divisions that you love, in the sports that you love. And we need people like you, like, voices like you, representing Canada in particular, right? To showcase to the bodybuilding community that, we are all here and it is important, to have trans people to include us, right? In just mainstream competition in general. So we thank so much wholeheartedly for your time and for your very honest, open conversation with us today. I'm sure our audience will get benefits from it. We will also repost this on YouTube later on so that anyone could revisit that again. And don't forget that our competition will be in November 23rd this year. And if you can make yourself to Atlanta, we will welcome you. We will try to find ways to have you. Maybe you can do a guest posting for us.
That would be so cool. Honestly, I would love to do that. If we can make that work out timeline
Yeah.
wise, like that would
Yes.
be such a cool experience. I would love to be part of that show with you
Okay. Yes.
guys.
Then I will think about that. I would think how to
Yeah,
put you in a guest posting potentially, and we
yeah.
need it because this will be our 10th year
That's
to be
huge.
and
Congrats. Let's
yes,
Thank
go.
you.
yes.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you so much,
Yeah,
and
and
for
I do
our.
really want to
Mhm,
say thank you to both of you guys so much. I really, really, really appreciate both of you, having me on here today. This is definitely the first time I've ever done like a podcast type,
mhm,
setup like this. So, hopefully I kind of went with a good flow for you guys. But realistically speaking, I am also doing a YouTube series on my whole
mm,
bodybuilding prep right now as well. So, if anybody does want to check that out, I'm kind of going in depth, how much cardio I'm doing, what I'm eating, how's training,
mm,
even like, maybe the mental things that we kind of go through those ups and down days throughout prep as well. I'm kind of showing everybody everything that goes into it because, it's a beautiful experience, but I like to show people kind of like everything that kind of goes into it. So, for everybody that wants to do that show coming up, there's, lots of good information in there to set yourself up for a good prep. And you guys have your show in November, is it?
November.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yes,
Love it, love
and
it.
feel free to follow IATBP, our organization Instagram, and also Kyle's Instagram. They're all available, somewhere in our posts, I'm sure. But thank you so much for your time, and and for the really really eye-opening conversation with us. And we hope to see you soon, on stage.
Super
Um,
appreciate that. And it
thank
was
you.
great to actually, meet somewhat face to face like this. So, it was
Yeah, it's
awesome.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, thank you so much for your time, and thanks, Siu Feng, for that awesome closeout. And yeah, so just to reiterate, our competition's on November 23rd, so just keep an eye out. If you want to compete with us, register to compete on our website, or just fly out to watch. And the event's also going to be live streamed online if you can't make it out. So yeah, just follow us on social media to keep up with all that. And Kyle, actually, if you want to send me the link to your YouTube series, I'll put it in the caption of the YouTube upload
Okay,
of the
sweet.
interview so people can go check that out. Okay.
Awesome,
okay.
awesome. Sounds great.
Okay, so awesome. Thank you so much for today. And we will see you soon in our next fireside chat. So stay
Yes,
tuned on
absolutely.
our Instagram so that you will know when will be our next guest. But thank you so much, Kyle, and thank you, Nat, for today. And I will see you
Absolutely.
all soon later. Okay,
All
see
right.
Yes.
you.
Have a good rest of your day,
Yeah, see
guys.
you. See
Adios.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.